one of the things that I was excited to do in relation to this series of videos that we're working on. Who knows what they're going to be called? We don't have that nailed down yet, but long form content, and really getting into in-depth conversations and storytelling, and
For
getting
sure.
a lot of the detail out there. And I guess, the thing that is important, I think, for us and for the organization is to record some of the things that will go away when we go away.
Yeah.
You know what
Right.
I mean? And as our group ages out and people retire and go about their business in other worlds, a lot of the stuff will go away, right? And so that's why we've done one of these already, and it was really about the genesis of the organization, even pre-BIGGBY and so on. I
Yeah.
thought that was a really cool conversation. I wanted to, though, spend a few minutes today talking about why I think these videos are important
Yeah.
and why we're doing them. And it's, I think in so many ways, the stuff that we advocate in the world, if you don't have the background on the how we learned it, why we learned it, why we do it the way we do it, maybe some of the stuff doesn't add up, right?
Doesn't
If
make
you're
sense. Yeah.
if you're a store manager and you're hearing these things like, the countless different things that we advocate, and you don't really understand and know why we do it that way, it's kind of like, well, it's not as powerful, I guess. And so the storytelling is what I want to do, right? That's the point of this. I know when we got into having the conversation about doing these, you were excited to uh, get into some of the what the operating philosophy and the core
Sure.
values. You thought that spending time on the core values, that was one of the
Yeah.
first things that popped out of your brain in terms of things that we should cover in great detail. So, what are some of the other things that you think would be valuable for people to get the long version of the story?
Huh. You know, so when we do those core values, by the way, I want to get into where the genesis of that core value comes from. So we often speak to the core value and what it means to somebody, what we're trying to communicate about it. But we don't really find the genesis point that created that core value, right? And I think it'd be worth getting into that. So that's one thing that's different than the question you asked, but I thought it was
No,
important to get it out there.
roll.
But the other thing is, we definitely have to cover some of the major pinch points and what that feels like. Whether it was the financial crisis or our own personal financial crisis with B3 at that time, and many others that we had been through. Uh, because it all looks like unicorns and rainbows. The trajectory of our
Yeah.
of our business. And I think it's important to understand that these events also shaped some thinking or some conservativeness or some aggressiveness. However, whatever the outcome on these things were, they became foundational to how we exercise the business. The other thing I think that's going to be important is to uncover the 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 development of an individual. In other words, if you want to grow a business, you have to grow yourself, and some stuff has to change, like how you not your beliefs, not your values or anything like that, but who you might need to be in this world in order to achieve those objectives. What it takes to do those things. I think that mustering, overcoming your personal and emotional deficiencies in order to lead a group of people in a certain direction. I think peeling that back could be really interesting as well.
Yeah, I think that piece there is, I think it took us a long time, and I hope others would meet this a little more quickly than we did, it took us a long time to realize that component, that we had to be different people within the organization as the organization changed and grew. If you stayed the same as you were at the outset, you weren't going to grow the company to where you wanted the company
You were
to
going to
have.
plateau.
Right.
It was going to plateau.
And you always have to be evolving. And I write a lot about that and grow in relation to you as the leader need to be the person the organization needs you to be in that moment. Right.
And I love that line.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And,
love
and,
that line.
but that's different at different moments too. And for shit, it can be different in different days. In one day, it can be different
In one
days.
day. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's it. I like that. I like that a lot. But um,
The other thing is to me is to uh, discover and uncover uh when you operate a business like ours that slots into an industry, and there's this like industry expectation, and to the outside world, which might even include the owner operators, be like, you're supposed to do the X, Y, and Z. That's what I read in a magazine. That's what I read in a book. That's what Howard Schultz is saying on television. And breaking through that idea that if we do what everybody else is doing, we're just going to be somebody else's also ran. And there has to be some casting of the line out. There has to be some risk taking in trying some of the things that can differentiate you in a magnificent way, whether it's something in store design or something in marketing or something in operational capacity or culture or whatever. Uh, if you're creating a concept, who gives a shit that you're creating a concept? And if it's going to be just like everybody else, then fuck it.
Right.
You're not going to survive. You're not going to evolve. You're not going to grow. You're not going to be able to be. You're not going to be able to define this reason. Why should you go to BIGGBY Coffee? Right? It's peeling that back, because I find that to be a perpetual battle, even inside of our organization, not to mention outside of the organization.
Well, and that's the point of these.
Yeah.
I mean, truly, really, truly, I think that's the point of these recordings, is
Yeah.
to allow others to hear the reasons why and when we did peel the onion back and we did
Yeah.
peel the layers out and try to do something, very differently. And we've never, I've specifically never been real interested in going out and copying what other people are doing. I remember Mary Roselle for years would say, well, there's got to be somebody else that's already done this before, and we should just, I'm like, it doesn't mean that that's the way we should do it,
Yeah.
and we used to have pretty heated debates over that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Uh, Points of differentiation. I know that at the beginning, one of the biggest points of differentiation was this concept of operating like a restaurant.
Yeah.
And coming out of that mentality, and that made the operation, the espresso bar specifically, functioning like a high volume kitchen, operate way more effectively, way more efficiently than the standard espresso bar had been to date. And that was radical prioritization around position priorities and so
Yeah.
on.
Which
I
which
know it.
was
I know.
really radical at that moment in
Oh,
time.
it was, yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
mean, the thing that nobody really understands is, I mean, it was just a bunch of mom and poppers out there, free pouring
Well,
and
I wanted you to get into that. So get into
yeah,
portion control. Talk about
yeah,
that. Because right
yeah.
today I mean, maybe it's a little bit more common, but it wasn't common back in 1995, that's for sure.
No, no. I mean, uh, one of the great blessings I had was attending Michigan State University, was learning, having a degree in hospitality, and having, pounded into me standardized recipes or, operational efficiencies, and a way of doing things that is written down, right? And having it written down, like people come to me today and like, well, how do we create a blah blah blah, concept? I'm like, well, if you can't put it in black and white, you can't communicate it to others, right? So, even in the very early days, we had an operations manual, and there was a way to do things, and it was liberating to have that, right? To have a way to do things and not just making it up as you go along. But standardized recipes meant that and portion control meant that you could produce the same product on the morning shift to the evening shift to one location to another location. And consistency, that's the C of perk, of course. That's the origin of that. Consistency was and can be more important than quality. It's not that we're short on quality. We've got quality in droves, but to be able to consistently produce a product is the thing that keeps people coming back. And you couldn't get that at any other cafe. Like when we started in the East Lansing area, there were like 35 independent coffee shops, and you couldn't get that, right? It was all free pour and a little this and a little that and so on and so forth. So you came to BIGGBY Coffee. You always, if you ordered a caramel marble, it always tasted the same. It was very consistent. That was a real leg up. And it's the reason that all those independent coffee shops, maybe minus one went away, and we grew in the greater Lansing area. That was the first like wave of growth, because you always knew what
But
what what
it's very much the McDonald's success story, right? So
totally, which is
it's McDonald's hamburger. I mean, it's not the best burger in the world. We all know that, right?
mhm,
But you show up and 99% of the time you're gonna get the burger you believe that you order. You're gonna get the burger that you expect when you order it, right?
right,
And that's your whole point of it. It doesn't even necessarily, it may be more powerful than quality, right? That the customer really truly just wants to know what the heck they're going to get when they show up. And you did that originally. I helped scale that, right? Make that a
totally
really
scale that.
integral part of the culture was simplicity through systems.
Yeah,
That operations manual is the system.
yeah,
And the thing that I talk about constantly, if I have the opportunity, is that you as an individual coming into a franchise, or you as an individual opening an independent cafe, you are not smarter than the collective body of hundreds of franchise owners working off of one manual, improving one manual over 25 years. And like, to me, that's the real benefit to what we bring to a franchise owner, is that collective history. So a franchisee does something in the field, figures out some problem that gets taken from them and brought into the operations manual and given to everybody at the next time we do the update, right? So that's to me, it is the biggest reason that you get into a franchise system. And it's not talked about that much in the world. Like, I think everybody is kind of like, well, yeah, there's systems. But I don't think anybody really talks about the power of that collective system that everybody's improving on the daily, right? I mean, remember how quickly we rolled out plexiglass during COVID?
yeah. It was
That was
amazing. Yeah,
insanity, right? Before anybody else had even thought of plexiglass.
yeah,
We had
that's right.
plexiglass in all of our stores, right?
Yeah,
Not all, but a big percentage of them, because Joe in Owasso did it, took pictures of it, built it, and sent it to everybody. Everybody's like, "Oh,
that's
that's a
right.
good idea." You remember?
Yeah, I know it was, and that happened in dozens of ways in that moment in
Yeah, right,
time. It was
right.
really incredible.
And that's the power of the collective intelligence of a franchise system.
Yeah,
And when you come into a franchise, there are positives and there are negatives, right? The negatives, you just got to deal with them. It sucks. It weighs, right? Like, I just had this conversation about hours of operation with somebody last week, right?
yeah.
It's like, well, yeah, like, it kind of sucks that you got to stay open an hour longer than you think you should have to
Mm.
exactly in your location. But the massive benefit you get about being a part of that system is incredible.
Yeah,
So let's
and the
spend
list
this
is
let's
long.
spend this hour, whatever, we're hour here that we've got
Yeah.
scheduled. Let's talk about why we're better. I love this conversation. Why are we
Yeah,
better? We just talked about portion control
yeah,
and systems and
yeah.
operations manual. Um, let's what the competitive
Well,
advantages of BIGGBY Coffee. I want you to spend a moment, if you can. This might not be a fair question to ask you on the spot.
yeah,
I've always said that one of the, and then I want you talking about this piece I'm going to ask you about. And then I want to spend some time on perk and position priorities
you
because
got
I
it.
believe that this thing, the system, then what I want you to talk about is branding.
Hmm.
And if there's one thing that we've done, I would say better than any other coffee shop concept out there, including Starbucks,
Yeah,
because I think Starbucks branding has been a hot freaking mess for 35 years, right?
yeah,
I mean, they
agreed.
got away with it, God bless them because they just had the luxury of being first.
First to market, lots of
But I don't
money.
think there's anybody else out there that's got the brand that we do. And so spend, if you can, spend a few minutes talking about the genesis of the brand, what you were doing with it, when it was invented, and then sort of some of the stuff that we've done to make it such a consistent, powerful brand. Because that to me, it's one of our competitive advantages. Like,
No, for sure. I yeah, I mean, I think the greatest competitive advantage is that we are a franchise system, right? And if you look at any like major QSR group, McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, Domino's, Little Caesars, Pizza Hut, they're all franchises. And so nobody can point to that model and say, well, that's all screwed up,
right,
because
right.
they dominate, it dominates the industry, right? And it's to the points you were making earlier, which is simply you have input from a lot of different sources. Those get consolidated and redistributed, right? That's sort of the math of that. But if you're running a franchise system, what you know is that and you know that your customer is the franchisee, right? If you know that, then you really have to lean in on making that work somehow, whether it's revenue generation or cost control or marketing or what is the focus on profitability? You're obligated to go there, and it's the thing that makes it survive, right? I
Okay,
think that's
so
a
let me just recap
yeah,
that. So we've talked about, if we're talking about why we think, you and I think, that Bigby's a strong, powerful company. We talked about the early stages, we talked about the portion control. This thing, conversations can be all over the place, but we
yeah,
talked about portion control.
yep,
You just mentioned simply the business model
correct,
is one of the reasons why we're powerful, is the
yep,
franchise system. Okay, we've covered those two, right?
yep,
All right. Now, yeah, the brand, that's the next piece that I want to get into. Or if you want to go on another tangent for another reason, please feel free, right?
well, there's two things about the brand that really aren't straightforward that I think are worth talking about. One is that when one creates a brand, what you're doing is creating an expectation for a consumer and delivering on it, right? And it's not that the consumer came to you and said, I need you to create this expectation for me. It's that you went out and you're like, I am going to define who we are. I'm then going to tell everybody who we are. And when they show up, we're going to deliver. So now I know that seems all too simple, but that's essentially what we've done with branding. The thing that makes a brand unique, in my opinion, is if the DNA is understood, well defined, and well communicated. And the DNA of and this is a little self-flattering for both of us, the DNA of an organization is the DNA of the founder group, right? So that will always manifest itself. It'll always bubble itself to the surface, right? So, in our case, if we're talking about, like perk, the first three things on perk are all about people. And then we've got this, oh, by the way, make a consistent product. I mean, I'm not even sure we mentioned coffee in that, right? So um, that DNA of this being a people-centric kind of business and we've had many iterations of it, but it's always been there, has bubbled up from the DNA of Bob and Mike. There's just no doubt about that. So creating expectation and defining the DNA of an organization. And the DNA of an organization only works as a brand if it's true, if it's real, if it's authentic, if it's deliverable, right? And ours has always been true, certainly from, I think, our perspective. Our ability to communicate that internally and then externally, I'm not always sure how successful we've been on that. But in the main, if I talk to somebody about BIGGBY, that people-centric component always bubbles up in a part of the conversation, right? It's, people, why do they go to BIGGBY Coffee? Because they love somebody at their coffee shop. That's generally the reason why. Do they like a caramel marble? Absolutely. But they love somebody in that coffee shop, and that's the thing that brings them back over and over again. I think understanding those things and executing on those things, both expectation and realizing your DNA, has been one competitive advantage for us, and has been the thing that helped define why should you bother with a BIGGBY Coffee over some other coffee shop.
So tell people who you are.
Yep.
Right. And then live up to that expectation. Yeah, that's the sort of magic behind branding. If you tell everybody who you are and then they show up and they don't have that experience, then it's a disconnect for them, right?
It's bullshit.
Like, yeah, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. On this topic of the brand, can you go back to the very beginning and talk about the creation of the B? We've gone through some name changes and stuff, like, and I suppose we'll get into that at some point. But I really just, I want people to hear the story behind the B, the orange, how you did that, when you did that.
Yeah, like, I don't think that story is very flattering. But Mary and I were working on the concept, and we'd already decided on the name, and the name was Beaner's Cappuccino, and it was cup dash the letter A dash Chino, CINO, and that was the original name of BIGGBY. We knew we needed a logo, and my brother knew somebody that was like in the promotionals business, that would make stuff like this, but he was an artist and a designer and stuff like that. And and he was willing to like throw our logo together for $50, and which I probably didn't have, but I knew that I couldn't just draw it up, or I couldn't make it up, or whatever. And I remember him giving us four choices. He gave us four logos, and I chose one. I said, I think this is the one. And it was very like coffee shoppy. It was homey,
Cup with steam coming up kind of thing.
That kind of thing, right? Fucking, it looked like everybody else's,
like everybody else.
right?
Yeah.
And he said, well, he was in Chicago. We were in Lansing. He said, can you come visit me, and I'll take you out to breakfast? And so we went out to breakfast, and he said, listen, I know you chose that one logo, but this is the one that you need right here, based on the criteria you gave me, which is, I wanted it to feel like a national brand, to be visible from, as you're driving by, that all those things. He says, this is the one, the square block B.
I remember one of the criteria you told me about once was that if you were walking down the street and somebody was on the other side of the street holding the cup, that you could identify what cup it was by the logo.
Exactly. Or in the car next door, or
right.
whatever. Those,
because if it was a cup if it was a paper cup with the picture of a ceramic cup with steam coming up, that would be meaningless, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And then
and so for $50, we got the best advice in the world.
And that this is what you see walking across the street.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. It was great. The name Beaners itself, Mary and I were sitting at the kitchen table working on names and names and names. And I had read some article, like about PepsiCo and certain brands that if it had a strong name, uh, it could be a successful brand, right? And so,
Yeah, what the hell's a
uh,
Pepsi?
yeah, it's I don't who knows, right?
Right.
And that's how we came up with Beaners. And Mary liked it because it in the 80s, it's sort of a yuppie time, I think, into early 90s. And if you were a yuppie, you drove a BMW. And if you drove a BMW, you referred to it as a Beamer. You drove a Beamer. And she was really enthralled with the Beaner sounded like Beamer. And that would be an easy, quick name to remember. And and the word Beaners was so different than everything else that was coming out. So we talked about this idea that there were 30 other coffee shops, and they were all like Cafe Latte, Cafe Venezia, uh, uh,
Arabica,
Java Master. I mean, it was like
Arabica.
interchange words,
Yeah. And then there was Cappuccino Cafe.
Cappuccino Cafe.
Yeah.
I mean, they all sounded the same in the end. But here was this name, Beaners,
Right.
and you could remember it. Now, we didn't know it was a derogatory name towards a Mexican American at that moment in
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
That was a discovery we came to shortly after we opened, frankly. But the intent and the idea of the name worked out super well. And the logo, thank God for people just delivering the news that you don't want to hear. That guy saying you don't want that logo that I drew for you. You want this logo based on what you said.
Right.
And I mean, there's been so many times in both your and my lives where, somebody leaning over the table and saying one thing to you, your ears got to be open, of course, and your ego's got to be pushed aside. But saying that one thing, I think that one thing made all the difference in the world. Orange, uh, you know, later we made up stories about why orange worked out. But orange was because Starbucks was green. At that time, there was a concept. As a matter of fact, Starbucks bought it.
Seattle's best.
Sales Best
Yeah.
that was red,
Red. Yeah.
and we weren't going to do blue. And so, from a color palette perspective, it just wasn't much left. But later, of course, we talked about it being sunrise, and that worked out really well.
Fall
We have
harvest.
fall harvest.
Busiest
And the
time
other
of the
thing
year,
is that,
busiest day part,
yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So, but that was just chance,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
chance.
Yeah, I mean, but well-educated chance, right? And that's the thing. Like you were laying down good criteria for this gentleman you worked with. And also at the same time, you were open enough to take the feedback. And how often does that not happen in the world? I mean, I'm pretty amazed at times when we go have conversations with people and you bring them pretty what I would consider to be pretty succinct, valuable advice. And it's like and they just ignore it.
Here.
And I, I at this point in my career, I was talking to somebody the other day and I was like, the nice thing about gaining expertise, shall we call it, is that you realize like you're wrong as often as you're right. Or
Always.
maybe more, right? I mean, and so that, going into situations all like, firm and hot that you got it figured out is really, really dangerous,
Super name.
and with experience, I think you do just automatically gain humility because you begin to realize like, man, most of my takes are a hot mess,
Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah.
And so it's really about trying to be open and listen and take advantage of the collective wisdom, right? That's the piece. So anyway, my compliments to you too for not staying stuck on what you thought was the best one and why it should be that way. And that's impressive.
One other thing I wanted to mention was, I mean, we opened BIGGBY Coffee beaners at that time. And I think about Malcolm Gladwell's book all the time, and I forgot the name of the title, but basically you got to have 10,000 hours into something, to create some kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
expertise, knowledge.
Yeah.
And it happened to the Beatles, it happened to Steve Martin, it happened to hockey players, it happened to all kinds of people. And between working in college and owning a restaurant for 2 years, I had put my 10,000 hours in. I mean, like the shit that I was bringing to the table by the time we opened BIGGBY Coffee, we had a distinct advantage over all the independents who didn't have 10,000 hours of food service experience. So, we've been talking about, portion control and consistency and manuals and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
Uh, it's as simple as putting in a lot of time. I mean, when I was in the restaurant business, I was thinking about expanding restaurants. So I would go around and look at restaurant sites, and I had practiced with people that represented restaurant properties. I'd go there and pretend like I was going to lease it and go through the whole negotiation process and all that. I had done that over and over and over again. And uh, and so, sometimes like you can look at maybe a concept being created in what you might see as brilliance or courage or bravery or, all these kinds of things. And to some degree, it was just a matter of having put in 10,000 hours
Yeah.
before I got there.
I was trying to look that up. That's what I'm poking around on my
Yeah.
phone here. That would have been written in the late 80s, wouldn't it? Probably
Mhm.
mid 90s, something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm not finding it. I'll find it. But yeah, that I agree. And there was so much about, I think about why in God's name I like committed my life to you. Back in that moment,
Yeah.
right? You had
Yeah.
one store, and then I was like, yeah, fuck it, I'll do this. Right. I'll be an assistant manager in this coffee shop, and then
Yeah.
on a handshake, we'll go and we'll build a company together. And I think a lot of it was understanding that and seeing that the fundamentals were so well worked out. The simple fundamentals and sensing that that was a real opportunity. And I got to see that, and I think back to the early days of working as a barista with Mary in the morning. I mean, I got to see her execute that shit every day for months and months and months, and it was on freaking point.
For sure.
Now there was a lot of work that went into taking that, right, and putting it into a form that we could use. And we all put a ton of work into that documentation and so on,
Yeah.
but it was all there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I shouldn't say all. It was 90% there. And
Right.
then there's been, over the last 20 years, there's been some iteration on that stuff, but the fundamentals, I don't think they've changed that much. I
No.
really don't. I think it's
No.
still very, very similar and should be very, very similar to what was built back in 1995. So I love that. I love that the 10,000 hours reference. It's amazing. You know, to so this concept of branding, of living up to the brand that you say you are. But I also think there's some fundamentals in terms of how you execute the marketing pieces, right? So uh that is um you were very good at that. And can you explain some of those fundamentals? Like when you would go to the world and you would put our brand out there, talk about some of the things that you did, why you did them the way you did it. One thing, you know, is like designer trash, right? That
Yeah.
was one thing we talked about. But some of that kind of stuff, and then some
Yeah.
of just the fundamentals of repetition and so on.
Yeah. Well, yeah, repetition is key, right? Again, I read some article, took some class, I don't know what it was, but that when you're marketing, you're just competing with everybody else's impressions, whether that's Coca-Cola or Ford Motor Company or whatever. And if you want to get people to remember who you are and what you're saying, you would best intersect with them at least 10 times. And I think if you're a startup, it's much more than that, you know. And I understood that innately. And so what that meant was that taking a shotgun approach on marketing for a startup was not going to be the answer, right? It wasn't like, let's touch 100 people one time. It was like, let's find the 10 people that we can create as customers, and let's make sure we touch them 10 times, 10 people 10 times. Same 100 impressions, just concentrated on fewer people. And then, you know, let's pretend like you have no money. Or maybe you had no money. Then you had to figure out a different way to do that. And so that's where the designer trash thing came in, was
Now,
uh
disclaimer,
yeah.
designer trash was environmentally not sensitive.
No, okay,
And we
yeah.
acknowledge that today, right?
Well, we're 1995. I
Yeah,
mean, you
it
know.
was, I'm not sure that we'd be running around doing designer trash today, right? But yeah, because I remember at one point I told this story in front of my class, the
Yeah.
designer trash
Oh,
story.
you got
Yeah, and I didn't. I was telling it for the reasons that you're talking about it, you know.
yeah.
And then some student, you know, she raised her hand. She's like, "Did you really just leave paper products all over the place?" And I was like, "Well, yeah." She's like, and then you know where that got. And
Yeah, yeah,
I
for
was like, "Oh
sure.
my gosh," right?
Yeah,
Like, and I felt terrible, you know, that
of
I
course.
wasn't aware enough to know what that would sound like coming out of my mouth and how the impact that would have on these students and so on. But anyway, impressions, more of a rifle approach, right? So
Yeah,
go after 10 people, hit them 10 times.
yeah,
Uh, what were some of your favorite ways of doing that?
yeah. So well, first of all, let me say, you know, we had two size cups, and we weren't a concept that could afford logo cups. And I'm like, well, we got to have logo cups, because if we don't have logo cups, we got nothing. If we're talking about recognizing this logo across the street or the car next door or whatever,
Or in a classroom or
and you know, I had to commit to basically, you know, a minimum run was 50,000, so I had to commit to 100,000 cups. I had to build a shed in the back of the parking lot to store these. But to me, from a marketing perspective, it was more valuable to have our logo done properly. You know, like some people would stamp it on, or, you know, they would do all kinds of things to try to put their logo on. But I knew I needed full color, and if I was going to invest something in marketing, that was probably the best thing I could do. So, you know, in the beginning, we were doing 150 cups a day. You divide 150 into 100,000 cups, and you can imagine, I mean, like the glue might have been coming apart before we actually got to those cups. But in my mind, that's what we needed. And so, you know, I got to marketing externally, and I had these cups. Okay. So, what I needed to do was get in front of customers. And we have to remember that a specialty coffee customer, you know, 70% of the population drinks coffee. At that time, only 5% of that 70% defined themselves as specialty coffee drinkers. Today, it's just a whole different shoot match, but it was a pretty narrow slice of the population. So my strategy was, well, let's take our cups, go to all of our competitors, because we know that those people are specialty coffee drinkers. And at the end of the night, when because I closed down the cafe, I would drive around to all these cafes, and I would leave our cups at the top of their trash, right? Because if you're a coffee shop, you always have a trash can outside the door, because you know you take your cup from the day before from your car, throw it away, go in, order your next cup. But if they saw our cups at the top of the trash of other concepts, people would be like, oh, there's a new coffee shop in town. Or, oh, I guess customers from here go there too. So that was that was an initial way of marketing.
designer trash?
Designer
Uh,
trash.
or maybe you set it up like on the top of the
On
trash can like
top,
this.
even better.
You didn't put
Even
it
better.
in, you just got to set it
Yeah,
up on top there. Yeah,
even
yeah,
better.
yeah.
So
That's cool.
the other little thing that was done in the beginning, which has evolved into eWards, but there was no such thing, because the internet was barely born at that moment, and that's a little embarrassing to say out loud, but was to create a database, right? And so, we had a punch card. I think the initial one was buy eight, get one free. And in order to get your one free, you had to fill out the back of the card, by hand, your name and your address and your phone number. And then we would take those at the end of the day and put that into our Microsoft database that came
Works.
with whatever package
Microsoft works.
works. And then, I had uh, uh, 8.5 by 11s perfed in a 4 square that were postcards that we would either mail out on people's birthdays, or whenever we wanted to do a promotion, we would mail out to the people that were already our consumers, just trying to get them in one more time, or certainly try to like just communicate, you know like gratitude for them being a customer or some level of generosity. But I also remember I went to a guy, his name was Mark Grebner, and these are in the, like all this stuff is automated now, but he was like the go-to guy in Michigan for political lists. If you wanted Democrats with this income or Republicans with that income, or lived in this zone or this zip code, he had all of that. And he had done that by hiring college kids to just do data inputs from phone books. And probably nobody knows what a phone book is either, but he had these databases, and he would never give them away. But you know, uh, I don't know how sometimes I did this stuff, because it doesn't come naturally to me. But I went to his office one day, and I'm like, I need like a database of this income level with this level of profession and so on and so forth. He's like, I don't do that kind of work. And I said, well, I actually can't even afford it. So I said, what I was thinking is, if you could do that kind of work, I would give you 5 pounds of coffee a month for your office. And he said, deal. And so I got, like, for that moment in time, in the East Lansing area, basically that neighborhood that was up behind the original store, I got the database of databases. And then I started cranking that thing out, and started getting new customers in, uh, all on barter, basically on
Yeah.
barter. You
Yeah.
know,
Well, that's the early days of what everybody's talking about now, right? I mean,
correct.
and yeah, that database of customers, filling out the back of the frequency card, and that was gold.
Yeah,
That was gold, and I think about, like, some of my frustration at times today in this world is that, everybody is so excited to automate, but sometimes it does just take that sort of attention to detail of really getting in and understanding what you have, and I think about the creation of that first loyalty group off of the bat, and that was hard work. I mean, every single day taking those cards and typing in their address, and searching the list to see if they were already part of the list, and if they were part of the list, you'd go and check the box at the end to say they've put in 2 and 3 and 4 and 7 frequency cards, right? And just
yeah,
that amazing attention to detail. Like, it was obsessive, the attention to detail. And now what we look for in the world is just to be able to push a button or put in an algorithm or whatever and have this magic come out. Well,
yeah,
that's not the way data works. I was with a group in the last 6 months, and that, the thing that people like us don't understand is that the data in the world is a hot mess. There is a ton of it, right? Like, you go and you look at the data available to corporations today, and but the biggest challenge is cleaning it,
yeah,
and making it useful and effective. And that's very difficult to automate. But that's the process that we went through for years. I mean, we're not talking a year or two. We did that shit for 15 years.
we did.
And
I
remember the
remember that was
contest we would run at the stores to see who could add the most people to their list? And
for
oh,
sure.
Yeah, that
We
was
were super ahead of the curve. You remember that was Jeremy's first job.
data entry.
He had to do data entry, and he practically sat on a fire escape.
He did. Yeah, I remember where he sat. And then he hired, no, I hired Rick Slate to
Yeah,
do data entry, right? And was one of the funniest stories in BIGGBY history. So I hire Ricky because Ricky's a golf pro,
yeah,
right? Well, at that point, he wasn't a golf pro. He just worked in the golf business. He didn't have a job in the winter. So we hired him to do data entry. And he came in for his first day and he sits down and he starts doing the data entry. And Jeremy comes into my office and he goes, "Hey, Mike, the next time we hire somebody to do data entry, you think we could see if they could type first?" And I go back and I look, and there's Ricky. You know Ricky. He's Bill's in it north of 250,
yeah,
south of 300, and he's like over the top of his keyboard. He's like this, right?
yeah,
Oh God. So anyway, yeah, Jeremy was the first, and then I think he may have transitioned that to Rick.
yeah.
Rick did that for a whole winter, and he started working in the stores too, which I've got some funny stories about that, but we'll save those for another day. Well,
The other
I
thing I want you to talk about this because sometimes the individual at a hustle, the individual hustle at a store, I think makes a difference. But the reason I want you to speak to this because you really did it, and that's when we opened store two. How we go out there with a cup and what it was loaded with and
oh
what the
yeah,
thinking on it behind it was, and it worked. I mean, it worked
it
like
did.
an unbelievable charm.
And it would still
But
work today. I
yeah,
believe it would still work today if people
yeah,
did it,
yeah,
So it evolved, right? It started the very first time we did it was store two, and store two opened, and store two opened better than store one, but it wasn't a home run, that's for sure. I mean, it was probably a good solid single, and it so we wanted to build that revenue, of course, and so we started with going out on the street corner, and we'd layer frequency cards and one free beverage cards. And so there'd be a one free beverage card, and then below it would be a frequency card stamped 9 out of 12 times. And we'd layer those out. We put them in big packs, and then on different days, I would go stand at different street corners, and I would give them to every single person who walked by. And when someone would refuse it and be like, I'd be like, no, 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 like it's a free cup of coffee, like a free cup of coffee right here. And then 99% of the time they would take it. And I would go out there full of energy and try to make it as fun as possible. But then I always loved that because I would come back and the store would be packed. It would be packed. You're giving it away. I mean, and so we've learned one thing in our 29 years together is people love free shit, period. Right. So that was amazing. It really built the energy around the business. And then we just started turning these people into customers. Right. And in terms of marketing and advertising, you talk about acquisition costs. How
mhm,
much does it cost to acquire a customer? And if it costs you $5 to acquire a regular customer, that's like free. That's free,
totally free.
you know. And granted, now we gave away a lot of coffee that those people didn't turn into regular customers. So who knows how, at the end of the day, how much it really was. But and then we turned that into a campaign where we actually hired somebody to do this. And we would take cups like this, and we would put a one free beverage card and a stamp frequency card, and we would take that in. We'd fill up garbage bags full of them. Remember that white van we had? That
Yeah,
little, yeah. So we had that cargo van, and we would fill this thing full of garbage bags with these cups with a frequency card and a one free beverage card. And then we'd go into office buildings, and you're not supposed to do that, right? Like, of course, no solicitation all over the place, but you walk in and you go to the receptionist and you show them what's in that cup, that it's a one free beverage card at BIGGBY and a frequency card stamped on it. And they're like, oh, yeah, we'll take 10. I got 10 people in the office. And hey, can I get one for my husband? And hey, can so then you just start giving them out. But the point of doing that was, instead of just giving them the cards, is then that cup would come into their world. Sure, it's just a paper cup, right? And it would sit on their desk, and they'd be staring at the logo, right? And,
one more impression.
and more impressions. And then they bring in that one free beverage card, and you, with their frequency card, because they're together, and you stamp that frequency card that 10th time, even though it's free, right? So now they got 10 stamps. All they got to do is 2 more visits, and then they get another one free. And that was the campaign. And I mean, we did that. I remember doing that for weeks on end in Grand Rapids. Weeks on end. We probably had 10 stores in Grand Rapids at the time, and we wanted to hit every single office building. And we were just building the brand. And it was a you know, guerrilla marketing, right? Just
101.
hand to hand combat, doing it. And that was, I mean, I think today, if we were to do something like that, I think it'd be wildly successful. I really do.
I agree. And you know, the thing about it is if you want somebody to try your concept, you got to make it risk-free to them.
Right.
You know, and I don't know what folks don't understand about that. You know, that you're gonna transition all the responsibility of somebody discovering you to them. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever,
No.
right? So the other thing is to understand that it doesn't take that long to create a new habit, right? So somebody's going somewhere. I don't know where they're going. I don't know what they're doing, but you give it to them for free in a couple consecutive, and then all of a sudden they have a new habit. They're coming to you. They of course, you've got to close the deal. You know, you've got to create the environment, the expectation. You gotta deliver on that. They got to
Yeah.
leave in a better mood than when they arrived. They got to have a consistent product. You got to do all those things. You got to close the deal. But you have to accept the risk of bringing them in. And people are so abhorrent to the idea of free, and I am just not. I'm like,
No.
no, let's get our arms around these
Yeah.
folks. You know, just give me a chance, coach. Give me a chance.
Give me a chance. Well, the other thing that we did too, and this uh there was the community engagement. So we're talking about how we built the brand. That's essentially what we're talking about, right? And so the other thing was the community engagement piece. And I don't care who you were, what you were doing, what you were up to. If you asked us to support your event or whatever the heck it was, we'd do it. And we would go, and then we would show up, and we would maintain the area with free coffee so it would look nice, and we'd help people pour their coffees. And we did that for years. Then we'd also have a whole stack of one free beverage cards. And anybody that came up and got a cup of coffee, we'd ask them to come to the store next week and get a free cup of coffee on us, right? And that was just this continuous engine out there running. And that again, though, was a lot of work. It wasn't just dropping off Cambros at an event and giving people free coffee. It was going there, setting up, making it look nice, really engaging the event, learning about what the event was and what it was about, being helpful to the event organizer in whatever way we could, then also standing there throughout the event, making sure that the BIGGBY Coffee, the Cambros and the cups and the sugars, and that it was nice and it was organized and well done. And then just handing out free beverages, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like they were water. And the thing is how many of those actually come back? It's not that great of a number, right? But boy, you go to an event and let's say you can pull in 3 or 4 people that become regular customers. Well, what's a regular customer worth? They're worth a shitload over a 1, 2, 3 year period, right? And that's the way we always looked at it. And it was always top line, right? Top line driven, just generate the revenue, and you know what? Everything else will work out.
Well, the numbers we were using then, just to put a pin on this a little bit, is we had figured out that a loyal customer was worth about $700 a year, right? And we're talking about giving away 3 or 4 free beverages to do that, right? So if on any internet online enterprise today, if you could say that the annual revenue generated was going to be $700, and the most that you would have to invest is 20 to get them
You do it all day,
forever.
all day.
Forever, you do it all day,
All day.
right? And nickel and diming in this area is like suicide. It is literally like suicide. It is like cutting your own throat. The spirit of generosity, and we can air quote this, customer acquisition generosity, goes amazingly far from a customer acquisition perspective. Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, the customer loves you They
Right.
feel great about the concept. They feel great about the product. Yeah, we used to remember the stories we used to tell about like when somebody comes into this. Well, we'll get into let's get into all that next time, which
Okay.
is that customer experience part,
Yeah.
right? Because what we've really spent today talking about is, why maybe we were better in terms of like the fundamentals, the 10,000
Sure.
hours. I love
Yeah.
that. That was great. But then also we got into a lot around like how do we get people to come into the store?
Yeah,
And
for sure.
it was, and we've only scratched the surface. There was
Yeah.
all kinds of other stuff going on, but that's the challenge. And to me,
Yeah.
that's the exciting part of it.
Totally.
But then somebody walks in, you get it. It worked. They walk in,
Yeah.
then what? Right.
Close the
And
deal, right?
that's one of I think to me that is our most powerful, and I've
Yeah.
said it for decades now.
Yeah.
That's our most powerful internal system is
Yeah.
that customer experience
Yeah.
that we put people through when they're
Yeah.
there. And that was well designed and by no means left up to chance. It
Yeah.
was a system, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'll commit to. I'm going to make a note here
Okay.
and put a sticky note up that says next conversation with Bob. I want to get into this idea of customer experience, right? And
Yeah.
why that's so important. And what you're trying to do is either to get them to come back more often, to tell somebody about you, or bring them back. That whole
Yeah.
deal. So great. And then I'm not sure we'll do it next time, but I do want to get into in one of these the concept of promotions
Yeah. Yeah.
in parentheses discounting,
Yeah.
and why that has been such a fundamental part. I mean, I guess we did talk a lot about that today with the most extreme promotion or discount, which is the one free beverage.
Yeah.
But there's also the mentality
The
around why.
ongoing.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, well, this has been great. I'm going to make a note. We're going to get into steamed. I think we'll get into perk and position priorities next week. It's kind of that, when we used to do discovery days, it was kind of our thing. That's
It
pretty much what
was.
we did. So
I mean, we are feathering a lot of it in, which I like.
yeah. Yeah.
I
Just
mean, like
comes
we're
natural.
referencing it all the time, even in these conversations.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's the backbone of what we do.
Yeah.
All right. Great pleasure.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.